Namaste friends, I am Jayalakshmi Ravichandran signing in on behalf of Magic Needles. This day I am here with pattern 27 that I have used in my blanket, and it is worked with Hobby Store Special DK yarn Teal with color code 1062. This stitch is worked multiples of 5 plus 5 stitches. When you work individually, it requires multiples of 5 plus 3. To begin with, for the sample swatch, I have 34 stitches. I am going to adjust one stitch somewhere in between or at the end. In the blanket, you are having 302, so you need to adjust 2 stitches, one on either end. To begin with, make a twisted standing DC as the very first stitch. Otherwise, chain 3. Plus, you need to chain 1. Skip 1. Place 3 DC puff in the next stitch. So this pattern is worked with puff stitches and crossed over DCs. This is my first 3 DC puff here. Chain 1 now. Skip the next 2. In the third stitch, place 1 double crochet. Now working behind this DC made, work a DC in the previous skipped stitch. That is the second skipped stitch. We skipped 2. So 1 stitch between the puff and the crossed over stitch. Next, chain 1. Skip 1, place a puff stitch. 3 DC puff. 3 DC puff is made with 3 half closed double crochets. Chain 1, skip 2, in the next make 1 double crochet. Now working behind this DC made, place a double crochet in the previous stitch here. So this is the pattern repeat for this particular row. So you have a puff stitch, a crossed over stitch, puff stitch, crossed over DC till the end. I shall meet you at the end over here. I have come to the end of this row. I have already chained 1 here. Now place the last DC, skip this DC and place the last DC on the very last stitch over here. Now turn your work. Place your very first standing twisted double crochet in the very first stitch here. Chain 1. Now you are going to do crossed over stitch on each of the puff stitches. That is, you will do crossover stitch in the chain spaces adjoining the puff stitch. So now make a DC by skipping the first chain, make the DC in the next chain. Now working behind, insert your hook into the skipped chain, make your double crochet. So the first crossover DC is done. Now chain 1, and between these 2 DCs you are going to work your puff stitch, 3 DC puff. So this is the pattern repeat for this row, and this is the 1 row repeat, like 1 and 2 row repeat you can actually say, because you will be working crossover stitches between the chain spaces adjoining the puff stitch, and you will be working puff stitch between the DCs. That is the pattern. Chain 1. Now again skip the next chain 1 space, make a crossed DC. Now chain 1, a puff stitch between the 2 DCs here. So this is the pattern repeat. Continue the pattern, alternating puff between the 2 DCs and crossed over stitches and chain spaces adjoining the puff stitch. Continue this pattern till the end. I shall meet you at the end over here. I have come to the end of this row here. Chain 1 and make the last DC in the last stitch here. So this is the pattern repeat. Wherever you have the crossed DCs, you will be making 3 DC puff between those DCs. Wherever you have puff stitch, you will be making crossed over stitch between the chain spaces adjoining the puff. That is a pattern repeat for this particular stitch. The next is going to be a DC row for the blanket. I am going to stop with these 2 rows in the blanket and make the DC row. I shall make the DC row and end. For DC row, make 1 DC in all the chain spaces and 1 DC on each of the stitches, and each of the DCs 1 DC on the puff stitch. I have completed the DC row here. So the blanket will have 1 and 2 rows of the pattern enclosed by DC rows. Thank you friends for watching. Have a great day. I shall meet you with the next pattern in the next video.